The Biden administration is reportedly appealing a federal court ruling, it was a bombshell, restricted some officials in the Biden administration from communicating with social media companies to crack down on their content. It was more like shakedowns, actually. Judge Terry Doughty says the Biden administration likely violated the First Amendment by policing social media during the pandemic. And now members of the liberal media are putting that federal judge on full blast.
Government has to have the right to have its own free speech, to push back when they see things on social media they think are dangerous.
This is one of the most aggressive, far-reaching rulings you'll ever see. What this judge is purporting to do is to micromanage, really, the day-to-day interactions between essentially the entire executive branch, all these agencies that are listed as defendants, and the leading social media companies.
Essentially, what a lot of these allegations have to do with is the government flagging posts that violate the standards that these social media companies have independently set up. The idea that the government can't have any communication with these social media companies, I don't think is really a world that we would want to live in.
Former White House press secretary and current MSNBC host Jen Psaki was named several times by the judge in his ruling. Psaki and her White House counterparts were very public about the pressure they put on social media companies.
It shouldn't come as any surprise that we're in regular touch with social media platforms. We are regularly making sure social media platforms are aware of the latest narratives dangerous to public health. We're flagging problematic posts for Facebook that spread disinformation.
The social media companies have a responsibility. Certainly they should be held accountable. And I think you've heard the president speak very aggressively about this.
Emily, these are threats coming from the federal government. I was stunned. I mean, when I was at the podium, I would talk about the Khomeini in Iran, dictator, he gets to speak, and you're putting limitations on President Trump. So advocating for more speech, here they are threatening legal action against companies for Americans speaking freely.
Which was why the injunction specifically quoted plaintiff's lawsuit and said, essentially, look, if everything in here is true, which we are taking it at this moment to be true, not only does it represent one of the most massive infringements of free speech rights, but also, yes, the, quote, coercion, the encouragement by the White House of censorship. It's patently unacceptable. And the joke is that the media, as always, continues to frame this, the left-wing mainstream media continues to frame this as some type of apocalyptic environment that no one wants to live in. I'm sorry, we should all be celebrating the fact that this is a win, at least temporarily, for free speech. It reminds me of the uproar misplaced after this bakery case from the Supreme Court this week, where, remember, it was all of a sudden framed as against transgender rights and anti-LGBTQ, when nothing was further from the truth. It was a victory for free speech. Everything out of this administration, everything out of the left-wing media will be all about narrating. If you don't puppet their talking points and you don't think and say in lockstep with their narrow views that are pro-censorship of conservatives and Judeo-Christians, then they will label you as the bigot and ignore the free speech that is the founding tenet upon which this country was based.
Lisa, and then so you've got the press secretary as the public enforcer of this, but then you have this 30-some-year-old digital director. His name was Rob Flaherty. And listen to his shakedown. I just imagine him at his keyboard in the wherever he was, West Wing. Flaherty's July 15th, 2021 email to Facebook in which Flaherty stated, "Are you guys effing serious? I want an answer on what happened here, and I want it today." It's like a mob shakedown.
In his mom's basement, angrily. Well, you know, look, I mean, the biggest purveyor of disinformation and misinformation during COVID was our own government. I mean, it was never about controlling a virus. It was about controlling people. And sadly, I don't think we're ever going to get back to being as free as we were pre-COVID. I mean, the government got everything wrong. I mean, even from the beginning of it. I mean, they lied about the lethality of COVID. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that our numbers and the data points were totally skewed because we were only testing people who were showing up at hospitals and essentially dying. I mean, we were missing like 65-fold of cases out there. I knew that from the beginning. Our government knew that. But what it was about was appending the elections, getting Donald Trump out of office, and using COVID to obtain more power. And sadly, I just don't know if we're ever going to go back to being as free as we were before.
That is such an important point, because the CNN Chiron, during our show yesterday, here's what it said. You and I are familiar with CNN, by the way. CNN Chiron, judge rejects Biden effort to curb conspiracies online. What was the conspiracy? The COVID lab leak? The Hunter Biden laptop?
That's a lie.
Vaccines weren't as effective as they told us. They didn't stop the spread, all of it. I mean, it was all, like, what did the government say that was true?
If they got
Everything was a lie.
If they got it
with
right.
intention. They knew they were lying.
If they got it right, That would be one thing. But they got it wrong a lot. 6 feet away, they got that wrong. Ivermectin, they got that wrong when they were talking about saying, oh, it's for horse. No, it's not for horses. There's a different potency there. You couldn't say that your account would be shut down. You couldn't challenge masks. They got that wrong. You couldn't say that we don't need to close down schools for kids because it actually wasn't killing kids at the rate that some elderly were. They got that wrong. Hunter Biden laptop, they got that wrong. You get all these things wrong, and then you say you're coercing the government and back and forth, and you're saying who to censor and silence, sending people's names and labels to get them off the internet, and then you get busted doing it. Now you're saying, oh, they're trying to censor. It's like, sorry, this is America.
Yeah, and MSNBC, here's their hot take. Trump-appointed judges have issued odd edicts before, but as Steve Bannon writes, a 4th of July injunction blocking U.S. officials from interacting with social media companies was used.
Do you hate recording or having to order voiceovers? How cool would it be to be able to just enter your text and get a perfect sounding voiceover created for you in a snap? With a cool voice like mine.
Or a deep British voice like mine.
Or a female voice like mine.
Hey, I'm Joey, and I'm one of the 30 AI voices from Speechalo. Thanks to the AI Neural Linguistic Engine from Speechalo, I'm able to add inflections in my voice, speak a bit faster, or emphasize words exactly like a normal human being would do. Click the link below to find out more about Speechalo, and profit from our one-time payment and the 63% discount.
Have you ever launched a website only to be bombarded with a flood of emails with unclear feedback and bug reports missing vital information? Well, we've been there, and that's why we created
was uniquely ridiculous. You think they'd be standing up for RFK, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who was censored by the White House.
Yeah, well, that's the easy ploy, is that it was a Trump-appointed judge. So that judge has no mind of his own, or, I mean, come on. I mean, look, the whole case, if you really look into all the messaging, I mean, we're talking twice a week that the White House was pressuring, and I said bullying yesterday, bullying these social media companies. One of the most disconcerting things about this is that, these are publicly traded companies. They don't answer to the government. They answer to their shareholders. And at the time that this was all going down in 2021, Twitter was also a publicly traded company. Yeah. They need to be worried about business and responding to their employees and to keeping things, squared away at Facebook and at Google and at Twitter, not appeasing and ingratiating themselves with the White House. I'm not surprised about the mainstream media, though, actually misidentifying this case. It's a very clear-cut case. You just need to read it, everybody.
Ben, in addition to the COVID illuminating facts we learned from this, also these FBI meetings that they were holding regularly with social media companies in the lead up to 2020. What is interesting to me about this is they knew the Hunter Biden laptop was real in 2019. Yep. And you have these social media companies calling it Russian disinformation. They never tell them. Of course they don't, because it's all a cover. But this is the part that I find interesting. Page 60, the industry meetings were continuing at the time Chan, he was this FBI guy, his deposition was taken on November 23rd, 2022, and Chan assumes the meetings will continue through the 2024 election cycle.
Because when you want to alter and change the election, and you want to make sure that your job is safe, and you want to make sure that you're accountable to no one so you can go rogue on any political issue, you keep people like Joe Biden in office. Mm-hmm. And the guys that have taken over the FBI and the DOJ have basically said, we can ruin anyone's life we want to. We can do whatever we want to. We can lie. Remember, they closed the Hunter Biden case down so that you couldn't go back and revisit it. And they knew it was real. They knew he was being impeached over a Russian collusion case that they'd already said, we'll give you $1 million if you can prove it, to the guy who claimed he could do it. Never paid him because they knew it was a lie, and yet they still watched the president be impeached. That, to me, is overthrowing the will of the people in an election.
And the former leadership at Twitter actually carried, but the former leadership at Twitter carried through on that against the New York Post as well.
Small victory today. Washington Post. State Department cancels Facebook meetings after judge's censorship ruling. So maybe something's changing.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to